graders. I am going to spend a quick amount of time going over what you should have done this week for your Learning in Place English portion of the packets, okay? So here's how it's going to go. I don't want to reread every single story because I don't want you watching a video of me talking for an hour. So we're going to discuss each story that we read and talk about it a little bit, but since I don't have you guys to respond, I'm going to keep it short. If you have emails following this video, email and ask questions, and I will totally get back to you as soon as possible. I miss you all very much, still, every day. All right, we're going to get started. We are looking at Monday for week 3. So this is the first day we're looking at the ever-living tree vocabulary, background, and comprehension portion, okay? So in front of me on my computer, which you cannot see, I have my vocabulary and context. I want to go over the vocabulary with you guys. I do not want to reread the story. So seeing as how this is nonfiction, which means it's real information, our vocabulary is going to be sort of subject-centered, okay? So let's look at our first words for the story, The Ever-Living Tree. So first word, resources. Resources. Trees and forests are among Earth's valuable resources. Dense. Okay, roots grow from a banyan tree's branches, like a thick, dense forest. I think about dense as thick, okay? Evaporate. You guys should know what evaporate means from Mr. Matthews, okay? Water can evaporate into the air, going into our whole water cycle. Shallow. Some trees have shallow roots. The roots don't go deep. Think about a shallow ocean, so not deep. The roots are not deep in the ground if they're shallow. Moisture. Moisture is wetness. Civilized, which means advanced. Cities set aside places for trees to grow, okay, in civilized areas set up. Continent, all right, North America, where we live, is a continent. Opportunities. Opportunities are chances. Customs are kind of like traditions. We've talked about traditions before. A practice. And independent, which means by yourself. Someone's doing something on their own. All right. So you guys should have read the story, The Ever-Living Tree. And if you look at that, it talks about text and graphic features. And I want you thinking about why it talks about text and graphic features, because of its genre. Which genre do we know has more text features? Nonfiction, and this is nonfiction. All right, so you should have read this, The Ever-Living Tree, The Life and Times of a Coast Redwood. It was from page 586 through 598, okay? So you should have read all about the redwoods and forests and the ever-living tree. What you had to do for Monday was a workbook page talking about our ever-living tree. So I want everybody, if they can, to go to the practice book page 265. One of the most popular national parks in the United States is Yosemite National Park. The park is in East Central California. The area of the park is 1,189 square miles, and it is set along the Sierra Nevada. The park is famous for its tall mountains and valleys. The highest mountain is Mount Lyell, which is 13,114 feet tall. The valleys have rock walls made from granite. The largest is El Capitan. It rises up to 7,569 feet. People come to Yosemite to climb the mountains and to hike the trails. Along the trails, hikers can see animals such as mule deer, squirrels, chipmunks, and black bears. If you are ever in California, go visit Yosemite National Park. Fun fact, I've been there. It's pretty awesome. All right, and then it says use the column chart to show the location and purpose of the text features used in this selection. So we are only using page 265 right now to look for text features. So for example, one of the text features I see is a text box, okay? And I see headings, I see italicized slanted words, all are text features. So I could put any of those in the text feature box. The location would be the top of the text. A heading is at the top, right? A text box is at the end. So you would write that for the location. And what's the purpose? What does a heading tell us? If the heading of this text is Yosemite National Park, it's telling us that we're going to read about what? A heading gives you a hint. We're going to read about Yosemite National Park. All right, so you should have had something like that. It does not need to be complete sentences or anything, okay? All right, and now we're moving down to page 266 in our workbook, which has a pine tree identification guide. So here we have an introduction. We have some facts about different pine trees and a conclusion. I'd like to read this to you guys. There are approximately 115 species of pine trees worldwide. 35 of them grow here in the United States. Some, it's hard to tell one tree from another. This guide will help you identify some of the more common pine trees by looking at where they grow, their height, needles, and cones. So I know, since that's the introduction, it helps me to know what I'm going to read about. It introduces the topic, which we're talking about pine trees. All right, so we have the eastern white pine. It tells us the range, the height, the needles, and the cones. We have the Norway spruce. It tells us the range, the height, the needles, and the cones. And then we have the pinyon pine. That tells us the range, the height, the needles, cones. Conclusion. Pine trees are economically important as a source of lumber and other useful products. They are also beautiful ornamental plants. It's fun to learn about them. All right. The questions we have to answer. Use a column chart to explain text features in the selection. Then answer the questions below. So you've already done that column chart on page 265. So you don't need to do that. You can use that chart to help you answer these three questions. So refer to your chart that you made on page 265 in your workbook to answer the questions on page 266. Number 1, if you see a pine tree with needles that occur in bundles of 5, what kind of pine tree is it? So I'm going to look up at my facts about the 3 different pine trees, and I'm looking under the section needles. Oh, look, the eastern white pine has needles occur in bundles of 5. So what kind of tree is that? Number 1 should be the eastern white pine. All right, number 2, why are some of the words in italics in the text? So why do you think just the names of the trees are in italics? Why do we think so? To separate the facts of the different kind of trees and know we're talking about specific species of trees. Our specific species of trees are slanted, which is called italicized. And number 3, what kind of information is found after the word cones in bold for each tree? So let's look at after cones for each tree. So for the eastern white pine, it says the cones are curved, 4 to 8 inches long. For the Norway spruce, it says the cones are 4 to 6 inches long, cylindrical. The pinyon pine, we have 1 to 2 inches long, oval-shaped, very thick, scales containing edible seeds. So what do you think they're talking about? Because I think pine cones, okay? They're talking about the type, the size, the texture, what's inside of each of the pine cones. So the answer for number 3 on page 266 would be explaining the types of pine cones for each tree, okay? All right, I'm going to post my version of those answers in each of your Google Classroom. So you can go look at that as an answer key for the worksheets, all right? I'm going to try to do this frequently with any of the workbook pages that you need answers for, okay? All right. we are moving on to the questions that you should have answered following your reading of the ever-living tree. What you had to do for Monday was think about kind of like a KWL. What do you already know about redwood trees? What questions do you have? So what do you want to know? And then you should have written to explain what you already know and questions you have. So you should have written that down. You could use a KWL chart. You guys should know how to do that. All right, moving on to Tuesday. It says, read the ever-living tree. At the end of each page, pause and write a brief summary about what you have just read. So this is nonfiction, so we can't use the summary format of somebody wanted but so then, okay? It's nonfiction. So what you could do is for each page, you could have sketch noted and written your words, just like we do with our notes with the 2 words and the pictures, and then wrote one sentence with those 2 words in it, summarizing each page, just like we do or did in class with our 2-column notes. What new information did you learn about the redwood trees? So this would be what you would write in your KWL, your learned column from Monday's work. So after you read, you'd update your KWL. All right, Wednesday, you're supposed to reread because good readers reread. So you should have reread the ever-living tree. And then it says, use facts from the ever-living tree story to write a paragraph describing how animals and insects depend on the redwood tree over the course of their lives. Then tell about ways in which humans depend on trees. Okay, so I'm not going to give you that answer because I think you can go back and reread and figure out what do animals and insects and even humans depend on these trees for? Okay, that's a details question. It's directly in the text. Moving to Thursday. You were supposed to read Towering Trees. So let me pull that up. That is a different little teeny excerpt of poems. So it says, think of a tree you have seen in your neighborhood. Write a poem about it. You might describe how it grows and changes through the year or how it makes you feel and why. So the way I think about this is if I'm looking out into my yard, what trees do I particularly like? Maybe I want to go sit under or read by or look at because they have pretty flowers. So your task was to read the Towering Trees. So I'll show you what that looks like. Okay. So you should have read through each of the poems for that. And then you're going to think of a tree and write a poem about it, similar to the ones that you read in our Towering Trees poetry, okay? And then for Friday, it wants you to read grammar and write to inform. Okay, so I'm pulling that up. I'm going to show you what that looks like. Okay, so I know it's backwards, but reading this. And after that, you are going to write a process. So you're picking something that you know a lot about and writing a procedural composition, which means a how-to, okay? A how to do something. So that should have been what you did for Friday. What I would like to do is you all have access to my Google Classroom if you have technology. This is not required. It's just an additional resource. I'm going to post my handwritten answers to what I just went over in the Google Classroom for me, for reading. If you have feedback or you guys have ideas of things that we could do to help this process go along a little bit easier, please do not hesitate to email, okay? I can also call if you guys need clarifying help with anything. So the way to get that going is to send me an email. All right, guys, I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I will be posting those Google Classroom answer keys to go along with my instruction and going over the answers in just a few minutes. All right, bye, guys.